Greetings from our channel again. Richard Boone remains silent about the role that devastated him for 30 years. He was drowning behind the scenes, but it made him a star. The horrible truth now comes to light. The dream project that NBC ruined, the drinking that almost killed him, and the reasons he went to Hawaii to get away from it all. This is the little-known tale of how the best gunslinger on television lost everything while defending his craft. On June 18, 1917, Richard Boone was born in Los Angeles, California. Kirk Etna Boone, his father, was a prosperous business attorney. Cecile Lillian Beckerman, his mother, was a Russian Jewish vocalist. Despite their prosperity, the Boone family's home was influenced by more than just their luxury. Boone's father was descended from Squire Boone and was part of a lengthy American family. The younger brother of Daniel Boone, the renowned frontiersman. History and art coexisted in the home because of the diverse cultural influence his mother's heritage brought. Boone was torn between two worlds as a child. His mother's love of music and creativity gave him an early passion for the arts, while his father's side stood for tradition and discipline. Being surrounded by a developing city was part of growing up in Los Angeles. Brimming with potential, but Boone had no immediate plans to pursue acting. He excelled in both academics and athletics while concentrating on his studies. His family relocated to Glendale when he was 11 years old, and he went to Hoover High School. Playing as an offensive lineman under coach Vic Cameron, he developed into a powerful football player. The sport demanded strategy and toughness. Boone's traits persisted throughout his life. He was interested in other things outside football, though. Though he was unaware of how significant it would turn out to be, he had a strong passion for literature and storytelling. Boone was also a bit of a prankster. He had a reputation for pulling practical jokes, such as when he was a college student and some of his pals pulled a complex practical joke on a road close to Stanford University using a dummy. He had a strong sense of humor, but he also had a restless energy that constantly pushed him to do new things. One of the most prominent universities in the nation, Stanford University, is where he enrolled after high school. However, something felt off. For him, college life was insufficient. He desired something more substantial. He left school in 1937 and started looking into other careers. He became tough from the physical job he did as an oil rigger. He experimented with writing and painting. He even started boxing, going into the ring to see how strong and resilient he was. After World War II, Boone enlisted in the U.S. Navy in 1941. He was a tail gunner on TBM Avenger torpedo bombers and an aviation ordnance man. He had to fly through war zones and fire at enemy planes from the rear of the aircraft as part of his hazardous profession. He was assigned to 3 different ships throughout his 4 years in the Pacific Theater. He was put to the test by the conflict, influencing his outlook on life in ways that few could comprehend. He had survived the war, but what lay ahead was uncertain. He had to start over, just like many veterans. He was given the opportunity by the GI Bill. It opened avenues that previously appeared unattainable by providing education for returning soldiers. Acting was Boone's choice. He enrolled at New York City's Actors Studio, which is renowned for producing some of the nation's top actors. Sanford Meisner was his teacher. A coach who thought memorizing lines was not the point of acting. It was about responding, experiencing, and giving each moment a sense of reality. Boone accepted the notion. He put in a lot of effort and became distinguished by his systematic technique. He was more than just an actor. He also received movement instruction from one of the most renowned choreographers of the era, Martha Graham. Each lesson shaped him into the performer he would become. All of this would not have been feasible without the GI Bill. It covered more than just his training costs. It transformed a veteran into an artist and provided him with a way forward. He was prepared for the theater by 1947. He made his Broadway debut in the Greek play Medea. Directed by John Gielgud and starring Judith Anderson, one of the best theater actresses of her era, the performance was a huge event. Before relocating to the Royal Theater, the drama debuted at the National Theater. It was performed 214 times. A lengthy and prosperous run. Boone had a soldier's role. He was in the midst of a strong production, even though it wasn't a main role. Anderson gave a strong performance. For it, she even received a Tony Award. Being on stage with performers of that caliber was an amazing educational opportunity. It was evidence to Boone that his efforts were having an impact. His next significant move was Macbeth in 1948. His ability to handle Shakespeare, one of the most difficult roles for any actor, was demonstrated in this role. Then, in 1950, he starred in Martin Ritt's Broadway drama, The Man. The drama examined human struggle and morality, subjects that Boone would frequently return to in his subsequent writing. There were 92 performances. This offered him another opportunity to collaborate with well-known musicians. In 1950, Richard Boone signed a 7-year contract with 20th Century Fox, marking the start of his Hollywood career. Although switching from Broadway to the big screen was a significant jump, Boone stood out due to his presence and intensity. In 1951, he made his cinematic debut in Lewis Milestone's World War II epic Halls of Montezuma. He co-starred with Carl Malden, Jack Palance, and Richard Widmark as Marine Officer Lieutenant Colonel Gil Phelan. The movie was about more than simply conflict. Additionally, it served as a recruiting tool for the United States Marine Corps, giving Boone's initial position a sense of patriotism. Boone's performance was exceptional, even when performed as a member of an ensemble. He was a perfect fit for military roles because of his rugged appearance and deep voice, something that would characterize his formative professional years. But his appearance wasn't the only factor. He had acquired a rigorous approach to acting while training at the Actors Studio in New York. He was able to give his characters depth and reality thanks to that instruction. Halls of Montezuma was not merely a debut film. It demonstrated that he could add weight and passion to any part, setting the tone for his career. The movie itself was innovative in its use of flashbacks to examine soldiers' backstories. What may have been a straightforward war movie gained depth as a result. 2 years later, Boone landed a part that would solidify his portrayal of nuanced people. He portrayed Pontius Pilate in the 1953 film The Robe, which told the tale of Richard Burton's character, Marcellus Gallio, a Roman tribune. The movie was CinemaScope's very first release, altering the big-screen movie-watching experience. Although Boone's tenure as a pilot was short, he had an influence. He didn't portray him as a cold-blooded antagonist. Rather, he displayed a man burdened by his decisions. Despite being aware of his own shame, he decided to disregard it. He made a simple but impactful gesture in the movie that stands out as one of his most remembered moments. Pilate asks for water once more after symbolically washing his hands to relieve himself of blame for Jesus' demise. He was still feeling guilty because it was an unconscious moment. Boone's delivery of lines like, "Did I? So I did," added to Pilate's detached but burdened nature. The film earned over $17 million and proved that biblical epics had a place in Hollywood. For Boone, it was another step in shaping his career. He was not just another character actor. He was someone who could make even a brief role unforgettable. That same year, Boone took on a completely different role in Vicky, 1953, a dark and unsettling film noir. He played Lieutenant Ed Cornell, a detective investigating the murder of a rising model named Vicky Lynn. But Cornell was not a typical detective. He was obsessed. Boone's performance made him both terrifying and fascinating. He wasn't just solving a case. He had a personal fixation on Vicky that made the story feel more like a psychological thriller than a murder mystery. As the film unfolds, Cornell's obsession becomes clear. He interrogates suspects with relentless force. He appears at their homes uninvited, making them uneasy. But the most chilling moment comes when his apartment is revealed. It is filled with photographs of Vicky, arranged like a shrine. This wasn't just about justice. Cornell's mind was unraveling. Boone's performance made sure the audience felt that descent into obsession. Vicky became more than just a crime film. It was a study of a man losing control. Boone built his career on roles like these. He never played simple heroes or villains. He played men who carried burdens, made difficult choices, and often struggled with their own morality. His deep voice and brooding presence made him stand out, but it was his ability to bring complexity to every character that made him unforgettable. Richard Boone's time on Medic wasn't just another acting job. It was a turning point in his career and a bold step for television. The show aired from 1954 to 1956 on NBC, running for 2 seasons. Boone played Dr. Conrad Steiner, a dedicated physician dealing with real medical cases. But he wasn't just the lead actor. He also served as the show's narrator, introducing each episode with a serious and thoughtful tone. This wasn't the kind of medical drama that sugarcoated reality. It was raw, unflinching, and far ahead of its time. What made Medic stand out was its commitment to realism. Instead of filming on simple sets, the crew shot scenes at Los Angeles County Hospital. Real doctors were involved behind the scenes to ensure medical accuracy. The show tackled issues that were rarely discussed on television, including mental illness, autism, infertility, and even the terrifying effects of atomic bomb attacks. One episode, Flash of Darkness, showed doctors treating victims of an atomic explosion, a subject that reflected the deep fears of the Cold War era. Boone's performance, as Dr. Steiner, added to the show's credibility. He played the role with quiet strength, making the audience believe in both his medical skill and his compassion. The very first episode, White is the Color, told the heartbreaking story of a pregnant woman diagnosed with terminal leukemia. It was a risky choice for television at the time, but it proved that Medic was not afraid to show the harsh realities of life and death. Even though Medic earned critical acclaim, it struggled to compete with the massively popular I Love Lucy, which aired in the same time slot. The show never reached a huge audience, but its influence on future medical dramas was undeniable. Decades later, shows like ER and Grey's Anatomy would follow the same path that Medic had paved, bringing realistic medical storytelling to a mainstream audience. Boone's work on the show helped prove that television could be serious, intelligent, and thought-provoking. But Boone had a complicated relationship with television. He took acting seriously and put everything into his roles, but the fast-paced production schedules frustrated him. He believed television often focused on getting episodes out quickly rather than taking the time to make them truly great. Network interference made things even worse. NBC once canceled an episode featuring a cesarean section birth because they feared it would be too controversial. Boone was passionate about bringing realism to the screen, but he was constantly running into television's limits. Still, he stayed committed to Medic. He worked closely with creator James Moser to maintain the show's high standards. Critics praised its intelligent scripts and bold storytelling. But Boone wanted more control over his work. After Medic, he moved on to Have Gun, Will Travel, a show that allowed him to have more creative influence. He not only starred in the series, but also directed multiple episodes, shaping the show in a way he never could with Medic. His role as Dr. Steiner had already proven that he could bring depth and complexity to a character. That same ability helped him turn Paladin, the cultured but deadly gunslinger in Have Gun, Will Travel, into one of the most memorable figures in television history. Paladin wasn't a typical Western hero. He was intelligent, strategic, and driven by a strong moral code. Boone brought all of these qualities to life, making the character both intriguing and unpredictable. Richard Boone changed the way people saw Western heroes on television. His role as Paladin in Have Gun, Will Travel was unlike anything that had come before. Paladin wasn't just a tough gunslinger. He was a man of culture who lived in luxury at San Francisco's Hotel Carlton. He dressed in tailored suits, quoted poetry, and enjoyed fine wine. But when a job called for it, he became a different man. He put on his black outfit, strapped on his holster, and rode out into the wilderness to take on criminals, corrupt officials, and anyone else who stood in the way of justice. Paladin worked as a hired gun, but money was never his true motivation. He charged wealthy clients $1,000 per job, yet he often took on cases for free when he believed in the cause. His calling card, a simple black card with a white knight chess piece, and the words, Have Gun, Will Travel, symbolized his way of thinking. He was strategic, calculating, and always in control. He wasn't just another cowboy who solved problems with a gun. He used his mind first and resorted to violence only when necessary. This made the show stand out from other westerns of the time. Most cowboy heroes were men of action, quick to draw their guns and settle things with a fight. Paladin was different. He preferred words over bullets, reason over brute force. When he did fight, it was only after he had exhausted every other option. This approach gave the show a sense of intelligence and depth that many westerns lacked. The series became one of the most successful shows of its time. It ran for 6 years, airing 225 episodes, and stayed in the top 5 of the Nielsen ratings for most of its run. Unlike many TV shows, it was even adapted into a radio series after its success on television. Critics praised its strong writing and moral complexity, and audiences responded to its unique take on the Western genre. Paladin's name came from the legendary knights who served Charlemagne, and Boone leaned into that idea. He made sure Paladin wasn't just a skilled gunfighter, but a man guided by a personal code of honor. Over time, he shaped the character himself. He softened Paladin's obsession with money, added humor, and deepened his sense of justice. Paladin became more than just a Western hero. He became a symbol of intelligence, morality, and strength. Boone didn't just act in the series, he helped shape it behind the scenes. He directed 28 episodes, stepping in when the main director, Andrew McLaglen, couldn't handle the full workload. At first, it was just a necessity, but he soon developed a passion for directing. He focused on character development, making sure the emotional weight of the story was just as important as the action. His work behind the camera helped give the show its depth. He collaborated closely with writers, including Gene Roddenberry, who later created Star Trek. Together, they made sure Have Gun, Will Travel wasn't just another shoot-'em-up western. It was a show that asked big questions about justice, morality, and power. But while audiences loved Paladin, Boone began to feel trapped. He was a trained Broadway and method actor used to playing different roles, but now he was playing the same character over and over again. He once said that returning to the role each season felt like drawing water from a well that kept getting deeper. Another time, he compared it to watching a boxer who was still fighting, but had lost his edge. Boone respected the show, but he needed something new. Even though he was restless, he never let it affect his work. He gave every performance his best effort. And fans never saw his frustration. But when Have Gun, Will Travel ended in 1963, he was ready to move on. His next project, The Richard Boone Show, was an anthology series where he played a different role every week. It gave him the creative freedom he had been missing. To stay engaged during Have Gun, Will Travel, Boone explored other creative outlets. He directed several episodes, working alongside respected filmmakers like Andrew V. McLaglen. He said directing required subtlety and imagination, and it kept him interested when acting as Paladin started to feel repetitive. He also returned to theater. In 1959, he starred as Abraham Lincoln in The Rivalry, a play about the famous Lincoln-Douglas debates. It had been years since he performed on stage, and he admitted he was nervous. But the play ran for 81 performances and helped him reconnect with the excitement of live acting. Richard Boone never hesitated to speak his mind. In a 1960 interview, he called most television a waste of time. He believed the industry cared more about profits than good storytelling. Every season, producers kept recycling old ideas instead of creating something fresh. Boone saw television as stuck in a cycle, repeating itself while quality slowly disappeared. He wasn't just complaining. He fought to make Have Gun, Will Travel different from other westerns. He pushed for deeper characters and better scripts, refusing to let the show become just another formulaic production. But no matter how much effort he put in, he saw the same problem everywhere. Many people in the industry were happy to produce forgettable content as long as it made money. Boone saw trouble ahead. He warned that if television kept following this pattern, audiences would start losing interest. He pointed out that something similar had already happened to Hollywood in the late 1950s when moviegoers began turning away from predictable films. He turned out to be right. By the 1970s, television faced growing competition from new forms of entertainment. His issues with Hollywood went even deeper. He believed the system treated actors as nothing more than products. Studio executives didn't care about talent or artistic integrity. They only cared about what would sell. Even with his fame and success, Boone often felt like he was just another name on a contract. He also hated the culture behind the scenes. He couldn't stand how some actors cared more about dressing rooms and perks than about their performances. He believed the real competition should be about finding great roles, not securing bigger trailers. That belief shaped The Richard Boone Show, where he gave actors the freedom to play a variety of characters instead of being trapped in the same roles. Richard Boone had spent years playing Paladin on Have Gun, Will Travel, and while the role made him a star, it also trapped him. He wanted something new, something different. In 1963, he created The Richard Boone Show, an anthology series where a small group of actors played different roles each week. It was like a theater company for television. A bold experiment at a time when networks preferred familiar characters and predictable stories. Boone had a strong vision for the show, but problems started almost immediately. Clifford Odets, the original story editor, died just as the series was getting started. His replacement struggled to keep the same creative energy. NBC executives weren't happy either. They wanted more action, more excitement, something that would pull in big audiences. Boone refused to change the show's direction. He believed in what he was creating. But despite great reviews and even a Golden Globe win, the show didn't last. It was canceled after one season. The network didn't even tell Boone directly. He found out later, and it left him furious. Hollywood felt like a dead end. Boone had given everything to the industry, but he was tired of fighting for control. In 1964, he walked away and moved to Hawaii. It wasn't just about escaping. He wanted to build something new. He had loved the islands since his time in the Navy and believed they could become a real center for filmmaking. He convinced Leonard Freeman to shoot Hawaii Five-0 entirely on location, instead of splitting production with California. He also tried to launch his own show with the film Kona Coast, hoping it would lead to a full series. But CBS passed, choosing Hawaii Five-0 instead. During his years in Hawaii, Boone still acted, but his career never reached the same heights. He starred in Rio Conchos in 1964, playing a bitter Confederate soldier seeking revenge. It was a strong performance. But the film didn't stand out. 3 years later, he played Cicero Grimes in Hombre, one of his best villain roles. He went head-to-head with Paul Newman in a tense, gripping western that critics loved. But by then, the genre was fading. The days of western heroes dominating film and television were coming to an end. By 1971, Boone returned to the mainland, though he kept his home in Hawaii and visited often. He took roles where he could, including Heck Ramsey, a show about an aging lawman adjusting to modern crime solving. It lasted 2 seasons. Hollywood had moved on, and Boone knew it. He had fought for creative freedom, taken risks, and refused to play by the industry's rules. But in the end, the industry had changed, and there was no place for him at the top anymore. Richard Boone had the kind of presence that made him unforgettable. On screen, he was commanding. Off screen, he carried a weight that few could see. His struggles with alcoholism and depression shaped his life, affecting both his career and his health. Many believe his drinking started as a way to cope with his past. During World War II, Boone served as a gunner in the Pacific, a job that left him with scars he never fully escaped. Over time, alcohol became his way of numbing those memories. What began as a habit turned into something much harder to control. By the 1970s, Boone's drinking had reached a breaking point. It wasn't just affecting his personal life. It was interfering with his work. During the production of God's Gun in 1976, he walked off set before recording his dialogue. The studio had to bring in another actor to dub his voice. Incidents like this made it harder for him to get work. But alcohol wasn't his only struggle. Boone had also grown disillusioned with Hollywood. He had dedicated years to the industry, yet he often felt overlooked. The cancellation of The Richard Boone Show in 1964 was a turning point. He had poured his heart into that project, believing it would be something special. When it ended, so did much of his faith in the business. Over time, that frustration pushed him away. He left Hollywood, first moving to Hawaii, then later to Florida. His struggles didn't just cost him stability, they also cost him career-defining opportunities. One of the biggest came in 1973, when Paul Newman wanted him for The Sting. Boone was offered the role of Doyle Lonigan, a part that would later go to Robert Shaw. It was a great opportunity, he turned it down. Some believe he refused because he had made enough money from Have Gun, Will Travel. Others think his drinking had made it impossible for him to commit. Whatever the reason, it was a decision that changed his career forever. By then, his health had already started to decline. Boone was a heavy smoker, known to go through as many as 100 cigarettes a day. Years of drinking and smoking finally caught up with him. When doctors discovered he had throat cancer. Faced with treatment, Boone made a decision that shocked those around him. He refused medical help. Instead, he chose to spend his final years in seclusion, far from the industry that had once defined him. On January 10, 1981, Richard Boone passed away at his home in St. Augustine, Florida. He was 63. His ashes were scattered in the Pacific Ocean off Hawaii. A quiet farewell to the place where he had found peace in his later years. His life was filled with both triumph and struggle. He had the talent to be one of Hollywood's greatest, but his demons held him back. Even so, his legacy remains. As Paladin in Have a Gun Will Travel, he left behind a performance that still stands as one of television's most unforgettable.